A bizarre organ transplant surgery unexpectedly grants 6 ordinary people superpowers. The girl who received the heart transplant goes from a sickly patient to a physical powerhouse, running faster than cars. The lung recipient turns into a human jet engine, capable of blowing a grown man away with a single breath. The young man who received the corneas becomes a human Bluetooth device, able to control all electronics anytime, anywhere. But the most terrifying of all is the old man who received the pancreas. He gains the ultimate life-draining ability, capable of absorbing others' lifespans to restore his own youth. These God-given abilities are both a gift and a curse. Driven by insatiable greed, someone is plotting to steal all the superpowers for themselves. Get ready to dive into the 2025 action blockbuster Superpower Squad. An ambulance shatters the dead of night, rushing a patient to the hospital. However, the patient flatlines halfway there. The deceased is a young suicide victim who had signed an organ donation consent form. 2 doctors sigh in pity as they begin to harvest his organs. However, the deceased's skin is abnormally tough, making the extraction process incredibly difficult. Suddenly, a nurse screams and stumbles out of the operating room. The patient on the surgical table has spontaneously combusted, turning into ashes and vanishing completely. Shortly after, the victim's heart is transplanted into a matching patient, Park Wanseo. Strangely, she shows 0 signs of organ rejection. Finding nothing medically wrong, the hospital discharges her. Her biggest post-surgery change is a mysterious circular mark that has appeared on her wrist. Wanseo grew up practicing taekwondo at her father's dojo. However, after she suffered a heart attack during a match, her father forbade her from continuing the sport, as both her mother and grandfather had died of heart disease. But how could she just give up her lifelong passion? While her dad is busy chatting with the landlord, Wanseo sneaks in some training. Curiosity kicks in, and she decides to test her new physical limits. Standing at the bottom of a long hill, she ties her shoelaces and sprints, ending up running faster than a delivery scooter. For a split second, Wanseo feels like she's about to take flight. A bystander secretly films her running and uploads the video online. The taekwondo uniform tied around her waist gives away her identity. A man named Park Ji-sung tracks her down to the dojo. He sneaks around taking photos but gets caught red-handed by Wanseo. That's when she notices a bizarre, familiar mark on his arm. Ji-sung reveals that he also received an organ transplant and developed superpowers as a result. A single donor can donate up to 6 vital organs: heart, lungs, corneas, liver, pancreas, and kidneys. This means the mysterious donor has bestowed superpowers upon at least 6 individuals. Ji-sung is currently tracking down the other recipients. Soon enough, they encounter the 3rd superhuman. One day, Wanseo sneaks behind her dad's back to enter a running competition, hoping to win a new pair of sneakers. Ji-sung waits for her in the shade. A woman approaches him, handing out free probiotic drinks. She tells them that she recently had a kidney transplant and, having regained her health, wants to give back to society. Hearing this, the two immediately check her arms, but there are no strange marks. Just as Ji-sung is about to give up, he spots a circular tattoo-like pattern on the woman's lower back. Meanwhile, inside a luxurious mansion, several shamans are performing a ritual around an elderly man on his deathbed. His eldest daughter steps out to take a phone call. She complains to the person on the line that her father has already gone through multiple organ transplants. Doctors said this time it was a heart and pancreas, but the old man still looks like he's at death's door. But right as she says that, the old man abruptly sits up, complaining that he's hungry. He doesn't look terminally ill in the slightest. Furthermore, a strange mark has appeared on his wrist. Elsewhere, inside an electronics store, a young man wearing sunglasses casually snaps his fingers, instantly shutting off all the TVs in front of him. Electrical currents surge wildly wherever he walks. This is Hwang Gi-dong. He strolls across the street into an arcade, using his powers to rig the games and converting all his winnings into luxury goods. Gi-dong is in his element, fully adapted to his new physical upgrades. The camera cuts back to Wanseo. She and Ji-sung treat the kidney recipient Kim Seon-nyo to a meal, taking the opportunity to explain the superpower situation. For instance, because Ji-sung received the lungs, his power is tied to his lung capacity. He can blow a literal hurricane out of his mouth. However, Seon-nyo hasn't noticed any awakened abilities yet. Ji-sung tells her not to worry. When superhumans gather together, dormant abilities tend to be triggered. Just as he finishes speaking, the light bulbs overhead start flickering wildly, and Hwang Gi-dong makes a sudden appearance. He knows everything about the three people sitting there, and is well aware that they are also transplant recipients. Through conversation, they exchange names. Gi-dong received the corneas. Whenever he comes within a certain radius of other superhuman recipients, the mark on his wrist glows, which is how he tracked them down. Ji-sung immediately takes a disliking to this arrogant newcomer. The next day, he pulls Wanseo aside to warn her that a villain is hiding among the superhumans. This rogue element is attacking others of their kind to monopolize all the abilities. He warns her to stay vigilant and not to blindly trust any superhuman who suddenly shows up. Ironically, right after this serious warning, they receive an SOS text from Gi-dong. It turns out the guy was caught cheating at the arcade by the local mobsters. Fortunately, the superhuman trio arrives in the nick of time. Ji-sung ducks into the restroom, having zero intention of helping. But Wanseo's hero complex kicks in and she refuses to walk away. She grabs a straw and tickles Ji-sung's nose, triggering an absolutely massive sneeze that blows the burly mobsters right off their feet. Meanwhile, the wealthy cult leader Seo Young-chun accidentally awakens his own superpower. He and his partner, Hwang Byung-chun, built their fortune by starting a cult and selling shady medicine. However, there's no honor among thieves. The two men get into a violent brawl over profit sharing. In a fit of rage, Young-chun chokes his partner and inadvertently triggers his power, draining Byung-chun's life force into his own body. Byung-chun instantly ages decades, while Young-chun's wrinkles magically smooth out. Realizing what he just did, he reaches out to a nearby potted plant to test his newfound ability. At the same time, in the underground levels of the Grand Cathedral, Heyak-seon is urging his crew to get to work. With the church's revival campaign underway, the construction workers are working day and night. One worker finally snaps, stepping forward to accuse Yak-seon of violating labor laws. Right in the middle of their argument, an alarm blares. A worker has fallen from a high scaffold due to inadequate safety measures. When no one is looking, Yak-seon discreetly places his hand, bearing the special mark, over the worker's broken bones. The man miraculously heals in seconds. However, Yak-seon suddenly clutches his lower back in pain, needing a moment to rest and let his body recover from the strain. Concurrently, Seo Young-chun's daughter, Seo Chun-hwa, having witnessed her father's terrifying new powers, deduces that it must be linked to his transplant surgery. She realizes that the other recipients must have awakened abilities too. Chun-hwa immediately orders her men to track down all the superhumans. Her right-hand man, Director Cho, is highly efficient and quickly tracks them down to the arcade. By now, the superhuman squad is crammed into Seon-nyo's tiny yogurt delivery cart, desperately trying to outrun the arcade mobsters. Seeing this, Director Cho immediately tails them. Wanseo has to use her super speed to push the motorized cart from behind just to shake off their pursuers. With the mobsters hot on their trail, Ji-sung resorts to throwing yogurt bottles at the pursuing cars. The sticky yogurt splatters across their windshields, blinding the drivers and causing them to crash. Before the four can even breathe a sigh of relief, the yogurt cart loses control and crashes right into a Korean BBQ restaurant. Living by the motto, "Well, we're already here," the quartet decides to just stay and eat BBQ. During the meal, Ji-sung and Gi-dong get into a heated argument. Since Gi-dong can manipulate electronics, he's a top-tier hacker and knows all about Ji-sung's dirty laundry. He exposes the fact that Ji-sung allegedly stole a friend's script and published it as his own original work. Humiliated and furious, Ji-sung slaps Gi-dong across the face. Unfazed, Gi-dong instantly hacks into Ji-sung's phone, continuing to mock his private messages out loud. Worried about Ji-sung's feelings, Wanseo tries to pull him away from the situation. Shockingly, Ji-sung lashes out at her too, cruelly stating that he only hung around her out of pity and never actually considered her a friend. The group splinters, each going their separate ways. Won-seo is deeply hurt. Having taken a year off for medical leave, she had struggled to make friends at school and truly cherished her time with Ji-sung and Seon-yeol. She is devastated that it all fell apart so easily. Meanwhile, Seon-yeol goes to pay her respects to a deceased acquaintance, but is blocked by his grieving widow. It turns out the man she was visiting was a firefighter who died tragically while saving Seon-yeol's life. The following day, having cooled down, Ji-sung tracks down Won-seo to apologize. He clears the air about the plagiarism accusations, explaining that he and his friend originally agreed to co-write the script, but the friend dropped out of the project at the very beginning. Eager to mend their fractured relationships, Won-seo decides to get the four of them back together. On the villainous side, director Cho shows the footage of the superhumans to Seo Chun-hwa. She schemes to capture them and use their superhuman biology to develop revolutionary new drugs for her pharmaceutical company, hoping to secure a Nobel Prize in medicine. By now, Won-seo, Seon-yeol, and Gi-dong have arrived at the meetup spot. Gi-dong has managed to hack the hospital database and identify the liver recipient. They plan to track the new guy down as soon as Ji-sung arrives. Meanwhile, Yak-seon is fighting an uphill battle, pleading with his superiors to prioritize the safety of the construction workers. Naturally, the church's higher-ups couldn't care less about the workers' well-being. Desperate to meet the deadline, a worker named Lee Sung-hoon sacrifices his lunch break to keep working. His exhausted crewmates head out to eat. Unbeknownst to anyone, a nearby gas canister begins to quietly leak. Outside the site, the trio is getting impatient, waiting for Ji-sung, and threatens to disband. Suddenly, a massive explosion rips through the facility behind them. Inside, Yak-seon frantically initiates an emergency evacuation to minimize casualties. However, Sung-hoon is trapped behind an electronic security door. Panicking, Yak-seon frantically smashes at the glass with a hard hat. Just in the nick of time, Won-seo dashes onto the scene. However, the reinforced electronic door is too thick even for her super strength, leaving her temporarily helpless. Enter Gi-dong, who casually snaps his fingers, instantly short-circuiting the lock and opening the door. Ji-sung finally arrives as well, but the facility is choked with toxic smoke, making it nearly impossible to locate the injured. Using his powers, Gi-dong triggers all the cell phones in the area to ring. Guided by the sound, Ji-sung navigates the smoke and finds Sung-hoon. Yak-seon immediately rushes over to heal the injured man. He revives Sung-hoon but suffers severe blowback, violently coughing up blood. Seon-yeol rushes to his side. In her panic, she grabs onto Ji-sung and unintentionally triggers her own superpower. It turns out Seon-yeol has the ability to link and transfer superhuman energy. Acting as a conduit, she channels energy to Yak-seon, helping him recover instantly. With toxic gas filling the building, the group decides to evacuate immediately. Halfway out, Seon-yeol suddenly stops dead in her tracks. They left Gi-dong behind. Ji-sung carries Sung-hoon out to safety, while the others sprint back to find Gi-dong, only to find his dropped sunglasses. The toxic gas has become so thick that Won-seo and the others are physically unable to push forward. Thank God for Ji-sung's enhanced lungs. Taking a massive breath, he braves the toxic fumes and manages to rescue Gi-dong. In the aftermath, the five of them gather at a nearby fried chicken joint. Yak-seon confirms he received the liver transplant, which granted him healing abilities. He explains that his power's effect on underlying diseases is hit or miss, but it can perfectly heal physical trauma, like broken bones. The catch is that the patient's pain transfers directly into his own body, though he can recover by drinking plenty of water and getting some rest. Seon-yeol warmly tells him that his self-sacrificing spirit is what makes a true hero. Flustered, Yak-seon humbly replies that it's him who should be thanking her for saving his life earlier. What the group doesn't know is that the cheerful, motherly Seon-yeol used to suffer from severe depression and anger management issues. It was only after being given a second chance at life that she vowed to change her ways. Since they're officially saving lives, Seon-yeol suggests they adopt superhero codenames like in foreign comic book movies. Because she used to manage a flashlight factory, she dubs herself Flashlight Girl. Because Won-seo is strong and loves helping people, she is named Lifesaver. Ji-sung gets Uncle Tank. The tech controlling Gi-dong becomes Bluetooth Boy. And since Yak-seon heals and recharges people, he is Battery Man. For the first time, the atmosphere among the five is genuinely warm and united. The next day, Yak-seon goes to visit the recovering Sung-hoon, only to bump into the cult's bishop, Seo Yong-chun, in the hospital elevator. Being a devout follower, Yak-seon makes the church's hand sign out of respect. accidentally exposing the superhuman mark on his wrist. Yongchun eagerly questions him about the mark. Yaxian innocently explains it appeared after his transplant surgery. When asked if he's noticed any other changes, Yaxian hides his healing powers, simply claiming he feels incredibly healthy. A sinister plan forms in the bishop's mind as he memorizes Yaxian's name and steps off the elevator. That night, while working his side gig as a designated driver, Yaxian's passenger happens to be Director Cho. Yaxian is knocked out, and when he regains consciousness, he is strapped to a surgical bed. In a display of utter cruelty, Seo Chunhua orders her rogue doctors to harvest his liver, without anesthesia. However, before the surgery can begin, the bishop personally crashes the party. Yongchun asks the doctor, "If we leave a small piece of the liver, will it regenerate?" Upon getting a yes, he ruthlessly grabs Yaxian by the throat, intending to drain his life force. Shockingly, his life-draining powers don't work on Yaxian. Thinking he's lost his abilities, Yongchun grabs the nearby doctor to test it out and drains the man instantly. He realizes his power simply doesn't work on fellow superhuman recipients. Frustrated, Yongchun opts for the traditional method. He has Yaxian's liver cut out and transplanted into himself. Left empty-handed, Chunhua sends her goons to capture the remaining superhumans. Ji-sung is ambushed by men in black suits outside a convenience store. Elsewhere, Seon-nyo and Gi-dong are violently abducted. At Wanseo's dojo, her father, Park Jong-min, doesn't know what kind of trouble his daughter is in, but he immediately squares up to fight the intruders. To protect her dad's pride, Wanseo uses her super speed to knock out the goons from behind his back. Moving faster than the eye can see, her father never notices her helping hand and genuinely believes he just beat up a squad of hitmen all by himself. Meanwhile, Gi-dong, Ji-sung, and Seon-nyo are thrown into specially designed holding cells by Chunhua, rendering their powers useless. Back at the mansion, recovering from the liver transplant, the bishop's life drain ability kicks into overdrive. He reverses his age completely, ending up looking even younger than his own daughter. This ruins Chunhua's master plan, as she had been eagerly waiting for him to die so she could inherit his empire. Fresh out of the shower, Yongchun stands before a mirror, admiring his youthful, athletic physique. Suddenly, the room plunges into darkness, and he experiences a terrifying hallucination of facing a deity. Tears in his eyes, Yongchun reaches out to take the god's hands, only for the shadowy entity to violently yank him forward. His body begins glitching, rapidly shifting between an old man and a youth. Desperate, he punches the mirror, shattering the glass and snapping out of the hallucination. As he looks down, he watches the cuts on his knuckles heal instantaneously thanks to his new liver. Still unsatisfied, his god complex peaks. He resolves to hunt down every last transplant recipient, harvest their superpowered organs, and ascend as an invincible, worshipped god. Chunhua is powerless against him, and her guards are slaughtered. The bishop easily breaches the facility and locates the 3 captive superhumans. At that moment, Hwang Gi-dong was attempting to snap his fingers using his toes, as his hands were bound by a specialized device. Just as it appeared his attempt had finally succeeded, 2 staff members suddenly approached, strapped Hwang Gi-dong to a stretcher, and carried him away. In the hallway, he manages one last toe snap, sending a GPS SOS to Wanseo and unlocking Seon-nyo's cell door. Unfortunately, a second later, doctors sedate him. Receiving the ping, Wanseo gears up to save her friends. Upon learning her friends are in danger, her father insists on coming along to help, leaving her no choice but to bring him. On the surgical table, Gi-dong awakens just in time to save one of his eyes, though the doctors have already harvested 1 cornea. However, the extraction process caused severe nerve damage, so Seo Yongchun trapped Hwang Gi-dong right next to Hu Yaxian. Luckily, because the bishop valued the liver's regenerative properties, he left a small piece inside Yaxian. Slowly recovering, Yaxian reaches out, grabbing Gi-dong's wrist to heal his badly damaged eye. The scene cuts to the grand revival event of the cult. The congregation is utterly bewildered to see their elderly bishop transformed into a 20-something youth. To assert his dominance, the bishop leaps an impossible height into the air, smashing his old portrait to pieces to showcase his superhuman strength. However, he quickly realizes that violence only instills fear, not true devotion. Pivoting his strategy, he walks over to a paralyzed worshiper and effortlessly heals his legs. He then gently touches a terminally ill little girl, restoring her to perfect health. Witnessing these miracles, the congregation drops to their knees in absolute religious hysteria, worshiping him as a living god. With his newly stolen cornea powers, the bishop senses Wanseo's approach and arrogantly snaps his fingers to unlock the main doors for her. Sitting upon his throne, he awaits Wanseo and her father. Spotting the superhuman mark on his wrist, Wanseo doesn't hesitate. She launches a high-speed kick, cleanly snapping the bishop's arm in half. Unbothered, the bishop takes a swig of bottled water, and his broken arm snaps back into place. Right on cue, Seonnyo and Ji-sung burst into the sanctuary, reuniting the trio. Seeing them all gathered, the bishop smiles sadistically. He can now harvest all their organs at once. Wanseo's dad fearlessly charges at the bishop but is swatted away like a fly. Thankfully, Wanseo and Ji-sung catch him before he sustains critical injuries. An epic final battle erupts. Wanseo charges the bishop. With both possessing superhuman strength, their brawl tears through the church like a demolition crew. However, no matter how strong Wanseo is, she only has one power, whereas the bishop is wielding a deadly arsenal of multiple stolen abilities. Ji-sung and Seonnyo rush in to check on Wanseo before launching a combined attack on the bishop. This thoroughly enrages him. He moves to grab Seonnyo but suddenly deduces her true power, energy transfer. He realizes that if he exploits her ability, he won't even need surgery. He can just use her as a conduit to forcibly siphon everyone's powers into himself. But right at that moment, Gidong limps in, supporting a weak but alive Yak Seon. The five-man squad is officially assembled. The bishop cracks his knuckles, ready to wipe them all out. Standing at the vanguard, Wanseo blows a whistle, signaling Ji-sung. He inhales deeply and blasts a hurricane-force wind at Wanseo's back, giving her a massive speed boost. Knowing they can't beat him one-on-one, the squad perfectly synchronizes their unique abilities, buffing Wanseo for a coordinated strike. Yet the bishop is simply too overpowered. Even with Gidong relentlessly blasting him with electrical surges, the villain remains unfazed. Instead, the cathedral's load-bearing pillars give way, and massive stone statues of the bishop collapse, exposing their jagged iron rebars. Drawing from the puddle on the floor, the bishop instantly heals his damage. He swats Ji-sung and the others away like rag dolls, hoisting Wanseo by the throat until she coughs up blood. With a wicked grin, he reaches out for Seonnyo to begin his power siphoning. But the squad turns his plan against him. Linking hands, the five heroes trap the bishop in a collective energy grid. Using Seonnyo's transfer ability, they forcibly extract the bishop's healing factor and channel it directly into Wanseo. Stripped of his rapid regeneration, the bishop is forced into a pure fistfight with Wanseo. Stripped of his healing abilities, Seo Yongchun had no choice but to grit his teeth and go head-to-head with Park Wanseo. Before they can even celebrate, they have to stabilize the collapsing structure to save the innocent bystanders. Gidong grabs the heavily electrified rebars of the fallen statues, successfully absorbing the deadly electrical currents as his friends watch on. Breathing a collective sigh of relief, the five prepare to pool their powers to heal the injured civilians. But the bishop isn't dead yet. He lunges forward for one final desperate attempt to drain their powers. In a split-second reaction, Wanseo screams. Park Jung-min delivers a flying kick right to the villain's face, sending him flying. The bishop's stolen life force dissipates, and he instantly withers back into a decrepit old man. Seeing this, Gidong snaps his fingers, turning the church's giant monitors back on so the entire congregation can witness their God's true, pathetic form. This chaotic group of misfits, who bickered, mocked, and constantly undermined each other, finally stand side by side as a true team. They might never be your traditional comic book superheroes, but the next time someone cries out for help, they will definitely be there. Because true heroes aren't born fearless. A true hero is just an ordinary person who, upon being given a second chance at life, decides to help others live theirs.